4:30 in the morning. 4:24 to be exact. Welcome back, guys, to another video. We are at Melbourne Airport. Can you guess where we're going? Got the mullet. I'll give you one more hint. Any more guesses? Surely it's getting easier, right? We're going to Bali. So we're not flying Jetstar or Virgin. We're not taking the Bogan bus. We're actually traveling a bit fancy today. Flying Garuda economy. Should be good. And also got my friend and housemate here, Spencer. He's coming along. Or actually, he's the one that got me to come. So anyway, let's go. Every single week, tens of thousands of Aussies pile onto flights bound for Bali. And for better or worse, Bali has a bit of a bogan reputation. For all of my non-Australians in the audience, bogans are unsophisticated, rough people that are a bit loud, not very polished, and into things like cheap beer, thongs, flip-flops, and Southern Cross tattoos. Whilst this all may sound like a negative description, many Australians proudly call themselves bogans, and I think we all have a bit of bogan in us. Anyway, heading to Bali is seen as the pinnacle bogan activity because it's pretty much our cheapest, easiest, and closest international holiday destination. Think of it as Australia's version of Cancun or Magaluf. And the main airline busing everyone to Bali, our unofficial bogan bus line, is Jetstar. These flights have stories. People getting drunk, fights breaking out, just general chaos. But today we're taking the least bogan option of them all, Garuda, Indonesia. We'll touch on this classy experience, but I've also become fascinated by this general market. Australia to Bali. Not because it's something I did a lot in my early 20s, or that the airlines flying it are particularly interesting. No, I'm fascinated by the aviation relationship between Indonesia and Australia, and the deep asymmetry that exists in this market. What am I talking about here? Well, Australia and Indonesia operate under a bilateral air services agreement. Basically, there's a hard cap on how many weekly seats airlines from either nation are allowed to offer. But here's the weird part. Australian airlines have maxed out their cap completely, and are even pulling little tricks to squeeze in more capacity. But Indonesian airlines, they're only using about half of their allowed seats. Why? Where does this imbalance, this asymmetry come from? The answer is complicated. It involves surfers, plane crashes, and some wonderfully goofy Jetstar routing decisions. But we'll get into all of that once we get to Bali. Sun's finally rising, which is nice. And yeah, what do you think? Percentage of people in this wing going to Bali? It's like 80%. It's 4 flights to Denpasar or Bali today? Or right now? Yeah, that's definitely the queue for our flight. Let's go. Let's go. Let me do a big let's go. Hop into the queue.
Was it not safe before?
Yeah, they went through a bit of a bad patch. Honestly, looking alright.
Actually, this is pretty good.
Pretty nice. Better than Jetstar, I think.
It's so much better.
Got a TV.
Oh, sorry. Is that covered?
There's actually tons of legroom. It's pretty good. Decent amounts of space. The sun is finally rising out there. Looking like a beautiful day. We're about an hour, 2 hours into it. I got my ridiculous neck pillow on. The meal has finally arrived. It's a choice of scrambled egg or chicken and rice. Spencer's gone the chicken and rice there. Honestly, it's a solid economy meal. It's looking good. Let's dig in. Metal cutlery too. That's it's quite nice. Okay, we're getting early reports from Spencer. The chicken and rice is...
It tastes really good.
Really, really, really good. I'm going to verify here. It is very good. The chicken and rice is definitely better. This is eggs. Just eggs. You want to try some? It really needs a sauce or something.
This is the best chicken I've had on an airplane.
Ever. Incredibly strong start.
I would just fly Garuda just for the chicken, actually.
Well, just Indonesian food, isn't it?
I think so, yeah.
I will not be flying Garuda just for the scrambled eggs.
Thank you very much. Thank you. That turnaround was fast.
Incredibly quick turnaround on the food. You had about 5-7 minutes to eat. There was a bit of delay because of turbulence, so they had to stop the meal service. So we didn't get it for ages because we were right at the back. Row 52 out of 55. So, okay, so we're about an hour and 17 minutes away from landing now. We've just had ice cream and some more drinks. What do I have to say? I don't know. It's a pretty generic economy flight here. A couple of oddities, I guess. My screen, they're touchscreens, right? These are touchscreens. Mine is not. So Spencer's one works completely fine. I have to do this goofy navigation. But apart from that, they've got like some movies. They are incredibly weak in terms of the TV shows though. But of course we are comparing this to the Bogan bus today. Well, comparison is all that really matters, right? Because of course there's better economy classes, but they're not flying between Melbourne and Bali. I think this is well and truly the best alternative to the Bogan bus. Quickly, there is one USB port under here. We've got to test it, don't we? We do. It's testing how fast the USB charges. So yeah, it's a 2.5 watt charger, which is not good. And actually, this might be the only thing that Jetstar's got them on. I'm trying to remember, and I can't off the top of my head, but let's cut in a clip now of, I want to say that was my first video ever. Actually, I'm not sure if I even had the USB tester back then, actually. Either way, not great here on Garuda here, but to be fair, there is a normal power outlet, so you could just bring your own charger. All right, so I'm just in the toilet now, one of the back ones. Surprisingly clean, for an hour 5 on a 6-hour flight. We've actually got some interesting, there's a toothbrush and stuff in here, so in terms of amenities, they're kind of doing a pretty good job. This is a very nice toilet. It's very clean. But yeah, we're about to come into land. We've got about 30 minutes till landing, so I will go back to my seat very quickly. But overall, got to say, this is probably the best way to get to Bali. All the other Australian budget airlines are significantly rougher than this. It's nice to have ice cream sometimes on a flight.
Locked in for greatness today.
Scusi. Don't know if I made note of this yet, but this flight is incredibly full. I want to say there's like 2 spare seats free on the entire plane. Somehow we're seated together. I can't remember if I did seat selection or not. I feel like I did, but it's a little bit confusing on the Garuda website, so. Isn't it?
That's right. Okay, what's that for?
You can unlock and lock it on the outside.
Oh, it's chipboard.
Yeah. Let's start with Bali. Bali's history as a tourism destination goes all the way back to the 1920s, when Dutch shipping line KPM started service to the island. Early visitors were wealthy Europeans and artists who framed Bali as a kind of living museum of Hindu culture inside a mostly Muslim archipelago. I guess quick aside here, Indonesia today is a majority Muslim country, but the island of Bali is overwhelmingly Hindu. To understand why, we have to wind the clock back to around the 15th century, when the big Hindu Buddhist Majapahit.
It's the Mahajapit, Majapahit, Mapajahit, Mahapajit, Mapajahit, Majapahit
Empire in Java was collapsing, and new Islamic sultanates were taking over the trade cities along the coast. As Islam spread through Java, Hindu nobles, priests, artists, and warriors essentially packed up and moved across the water to Bali, turning the island into a kind of last stronghold for that older Hindu Javanese world. Over the centuries, their traditions fused with local beliefs, and that mix is what is now called Balinese Hinduism. It's related to Indian Hinduism. They've got similar ideas about gods, karma, and reincarnation, but after a few hundred years of evolving on its own, it's become its own thing. It's very local, very ritual heavy, and woven into everyday life. Those little leaf trays with flowers and rice you see everywhere in Bali, they're a specific Balinese Hindu thing called kanagsari. For visitors, it gives Bali this very open, colourful, and kind of soft feeling. And well, because they are predominantly Hindu, rather than Muslim, it's one of the few parts in Indonesia where bacon and beer are all very easy to find. Bali continued on as this niche, untouched island paradise up until 1969, when a couple of things occurred. Firstly, Ngurah Rai Airport, Bali's only major airport, opened its international terminal. This allowed for, well, international flights. And secondly, surfers discovered the delights of Bali. Throughout the 1970s and the 80s, you get this wave of Australian surfers and backpackers turning Kuta from a sleepy village into a surfing hotspot. And then in the 90s and the 2000s, Bali turns into a full-blown mass tourism destination. And a huge part of that growth is simply geography. From Australia, Bali is ridiculously convenient. It's also in similar time zones and it's warm year-round. When you travel to Bali, you end up in this slightly strange situation. You're technically in Indonesia, but culturally, you're in a distinct little Hindu bubble. This combination of factors is what turned Bali into the tourism magnet it is today. Okay. That was a nice history lesson, but let's get back to the planes. Earlier I said under the bilateral air services agreement between Indonesia and Australia, there are pretty tight caps on the number of seats airlines from either nation are allowed to fly per week. Let's zoom in on that a little bit more. The current agreement gives each side an allowance of 25,000 seats per week in each direction between the 4 big Australian gateway cities: Melbourne, Sydney, Brisbane, Perth, and any city in Indonesia. Outside of these 4, there's no caps at all. Jetstar could theoretically start offering 1 million seats per week between Adelaide and Bali. When this framework was first put in place, all the way back in 1969, the cap was much lower, around the 10,800 mark. But back then, this appeared generous. Flying was still an expensive luxury, Bali wasn't yet a major tourism destination, and demand to Jakarta was limited. By the mid-2000s, as low-cost carriers arrived and Bali boomed, the Indonesian and Australian governments sat down and renegotiated. Australia was the one really pushing to raise the cap. Qantas, Jetstar, and Virgin had outgrown the old agreement, but Indonesia, whose airlines weren't even using their full allocation, was in no particular rush. What finally unlocked a big increase in seats in 2013 was a kind of trade. Australia helped Indonesia out in a time of need, and in return, the cap more than doubled to 25,000. But we'll get more into this shortly. For the period between 2013 and 2020, this cap wasn't really a problem at all. The Bogan missiles rocketed towards Bali, but they stayed well under the overall limits. But if we fast forward to the post-COVID era, that headroom had basically disappeared. As soon as the borders reopened, Australians went straight back to Bali in huge numbers, and the Australian side of the entitlement slammed into this cap. Between Qantas, Jetstar, and Virgin, the full 25,000 seats out of these 4 main gateways are fully allocated. Around 80% sits with the Qantas group, with Virgin holding the remaining 20%. The demand is so strong that Jetstar is even utilizing a mechanism in the agreement known as the Enhanced Regional Package. This allows for an additional 2,500 seats per week to the major gateways with a very strict condition. The service must operate via or beyond a point in Australia other than the 4 major gateways. For instance, Jetstar could operate from Bali to Melbourne via Darwin, and this isn't included in that 25,000 cap. Of course, they aren't operating this sort of geographically logical route. No. The 2 routes they launched under the Enhanced Regional Package were Cairns to Bali via Melbourne and Adelaide to Bali via Perth. Yeah, I doubt many Cairnsians and Adelaideans are choosing the 3.5 and 8.5 hour longer routes. These services are clearly there to expand the capacity from Melbourne and Perth. So it's safe to say that the Australian side of the whole bilateral agreement is completely utilised. But rather curiously, the Indonesian side, who also get 25,000 seats per week, is nowhere near capacity. Depending on the season, they're currently utilising between 40 and 60% of their allotted capacity. So what's going on here? Why are they not taking advantage of this huge market? Well, a big part of this is simply demand. This is overwhelmingly an Australian holiday market. Australian airlines have an easier time selling to Australians. But that being said, there's also safety concerns, a corrupt Garuda, and surprisingly competitive Australian carriers at play here. Let's get into all of this. Let's go check out this big Garuda statue. Just quickly. This is much more impressive than I thought it was going to be. If you've ever sat in the departures hall of Denpasar Airport, then you may have noticed the huge bird statue off to the south. This is just that. The statue is of Garuda, the mythical Hindu deity that was ridden by Lord Vishnu in the search for the elixir of life. Garuda has become an integral part of Indonesia's identity. It's not only the name of the national airline, but it also forms their national emblem. But let's not dive too deep into Hindu mythology here, and instead, let's focus on why Indonesia seemingly can't compete in this market. Let's start with their rather sketchy safety record. To really explain this, I think it's important to touch on some of the history here. For close to 350 years, the archipelago we now know as Indonesia was ruled by the Dutch. First by the Dutch East India Company, and then the Netherlands themselves as a colony. In 1945, they became an independent nation. Well, they did have to fight with the Dutch for 4 years and were only truly recognized as independent in 1949, but you get the point. Between 1945 and 1998, they had 2 presidents. First was Sukarno, who ruled for around 22 years, and then Suharto, who ruled for 31 years. These two were radically different, and I won't get into it too much here, but Sukarno was a little bit too accepting of communism, which led the CIA to get involved. This led to Suharto in a military coup to become president. Honestly, this period was quite horrific, and if you want a good book recommendation, the Jakarta Method is fascinating and excellent. Either way, aviation in Indonesia under both Sukarno and Suharto was heavily regulated. Garuda Indonesia, the airline we flew on today, was created as a government-owned airline in 1949 and had near monopoly rights over the Indonesian market. It's worth noting here that regulated aviation markets were incredibly common globally. Flying was still very much a luxury product for the wealthy and the politically elite. In terms of safety during this monopoly era, it was a persistent challenge. Indonesia is generally just a tough place to fly. There's mountainous terrains and violent tropical weather patterns, and well, planes back then had nowhere near the technology that they have today. There was a steady trickle of accidents, but overall traffic volumes were so low that the absolute fatality numbers were still modest compared to what was to come. In 1997, the Asian financial crisis decimated the Indonesian economy, and this led to the downfall of Suharto. In 1998, he stepped down as president, and this ushered in the Reformasi era. Proper democracy started to take place, markets were opened up, and for aviation specifically, this saw sweeping reforms that opened up the Indonesian skies. First, there was the passing of the anti-monopoly law, which paved the way for open competition. And then in 2001, the government issued ministerial decrees that drastically lowered the barriers of entry for new airlines. New entrants could obtain air operator certificates with as few as 2 planes, which allowed for dramatically undercapitalized airlines to start flying. This was a deliberate decision to encourage affordable air travel for the masses. This led to an explosion of new airlines. Indonesia went from having 7 scheduled airlines in 1999 to 27 by 2004. Lion Air is the most notable from this era, and one of the few that survived, but there was also the likes of Adam Air, Batavia Air, and Sriwijaya Air. These new entrants engaged in aggressive price wars, with airfares on key routes dropping from $90 in the regulated era to as low as $20. Much like the other post-deregulation explosions we've seen around the world, be it the Philippines, Malaysia, Europe, etc., this move did lead to millions more people flying. Aviation was transformed from a luxury for the elite to a commodity for the middle class. But unlike those other markets, this transformation also led to major safety issues. The DGCA, the Indonesian government body responsible for overseeing safety standards, was institutionally unprepared for this massive increase in flying. They lacked the budget and technical capacity to oversee the dozens of new airlines that, in many cases, were operating cheap, often kinda sketchy, second-hand planes. In many cases, these airlines, in a move to maintain low fares, would aggressively cut costs. Aircraft would be kept in service despite recurring technical faults. There was also the pilots. Demand outstripped supply, and this led to airlines hiring inexperienced pilots or foreign pilots with dubious credentials. The DGCA itself was also deeply compromised. Inspectors could be bribed to sign off on unairworthy aircraft, and this all culminated in a string of aviation disasters that occurred throughout the 2000s. I won't go through them all here. I'll link some of the more interesting ones down below in the description if you want some nighttime reading, but in many cases, the core cause of these crashes came from unsafe, faulty planes. The pilots were being pressured to fly, and there was of course just general poor pilot training going on. This all came to a head in 2007 after two preventable crashes that occurred within months of each other. Adam Air Flight 574 and Garuda Flight 200. The Adam Air crash was caused by a part that had been reported faulty more than 100 times in the months preceding the crash, and the Garuda accident was caused by a captain that continued an unstable high-speed approach despite repeated warnings from both the plane and the first officer, highlighting poor hierarchical cockpit culture in the country. In the wake of these accidents, the EU placed all Indonesian airlines onto the aviation blacklist, banning them from operating into the EU, and the US downgraded Indonesia from a Category 1 safety rating down to Category 2. This prevented any Indonesian airline from operating to the US or code sharing with US-based airlines. Australia took a different stance. No bans were put in place, and instead they kinda came to the rescue. In 2007, the Australian government introduced the Indonesia Transport Safety Assistance Package. This was an aid program set up to help lift Indonesia's aviation, maritime, and later rail safety oversight up to international standards. This ran from 2007 through to 2015, and the total bill was roughly around $43 million. The program helped in the training of Indonesian safety inspectors and accident investigators, as well as more generally getting the DGCA to align with international standards. For the most part, this program worked. In 2016, the US lifted their ban on all Indonesian airlines, and the EU followed in 2018. This was also the key bargaining chip in that negotiation around the increase in weekly seat capacities we touched on a bit earlier. So I guess generally, look, I'm happy to fly on Garuda flights, and we'll fly around on Indonesia's domestic airlines in the future. It is drastically safer now than it was 20 years ago, but the unsafe reputation and the overall brand of the Indonesian airlines was severely damaged by this Wild West period of aviation in the country, and this will be affecting the average Australian's propensity to fly with any of them. That being said, there's more to it than just a bad reputation, but we'll get to all of that on the flight back to Melbourne. We're feeling quite orange today. It's not a Max Verstappen tribute, it's King's Day. Which I've just started to realize now is a little bit maybe insensitive due to the Dutch rule. And I probably shouldn't have worn an orange t-shirt and celebrated, but we're here now, flying back to Melbourne. I'm not ready for this flight at all. Red eye, 5 hours, leaves at 10 p.m. I actually think I messed up the seats, but I haven't told Spencer yet either. So let's tell Spencer now. Have you checked the seating yet?
Yeah, 6C.
I don't know what went wrong.
6C.
No, yours is 50D.
Oh, so I'm in the middle.
I think we might have random middle seats. I'm really not sure what went wrong. I think I mustn't have been able to book seats and we just got lucky last time, but yeah. Here's the Garuda. Gate 6C. I reckon it's a bus. Also, I hit a quick t-shirt change because I felt I was getting a bit culturally insensitive. That last t-shirt was uncomfortable too, so. You excited? You ready?
I'm ready to go to bed.
Okay. Lucky we're flying economy today then. Alright, let's get the complaining over and done with. What are the issues?
Well, so I think the seat is actually narrower than all the other seats because
It's a very narrow seat, isn't it?
yeah, we're the tail end of the plane, so it tapers in and
Yeah, we're in the last 4. It goes to 3 behind us. So yeah, my shoulders literally are wider than the seat. And then also babies. I think there's about 10 in this section.
one start crying, all the other babies getting FOMO and start crying as well.
The domino effect. Anyway, this is going to be a rough one. I don't think I'm going to say anything else really. Got the tape measure, the ruler. What are you getting?
Front
56 centimeters.
51,
And that one is,
56.
I'm not sure about the accuracy, but it does seem.
Like the front, comes out. Ours doesn't.
I'm selecting seat next to seats next time. I take full responsibility for this. Apart from the narrow seats, this flight was very similar to the first one. Spencer and I basically just passed out for the whole flight. There was this chicken roll that they gave us after takeoff and a full breakfast service before arrival into Melbourne. But let's get back to our main thread. If we zoom out here, this market between Indonesia and Australia is dominated by Jetstar. They, depending on how you measure it, have around 40 to 50% market share on these routes. And they are fundamentally cheap. Not in the sense of being cheap compared to the competition, but just genuinely cheap. Outside of peak holiday periods, you can easily get a sub $400 return ticket to Bali. In many cases, it's almost as cheap to fly to Bali as it is to fly domestically inside of Australia. And they're able to be this cheap because they have an incredibly low cost base. I've covered this more in this video, but on these routes, they are mostly using fuel-efficient A321LRs, and they're able to staff a lot of these flights with Indonesian-based crews. If we look at the big two Indonesian carriers, Indonesia now has essentially a duopoly, with Garuda and Lion Air holding over 90% market share. Neither are really in a position to compete. Garuda is a full-service airline, so they're already not positioned to compete with the low-cost Jetstar, but they've also been ruined by corruption over the last decade or two. I'll probably explore this more in another video, but essentially their CEO from 2005 to 2014 was this guy, Amir Syar Sattar, probably butchering that. He is currently in prison for accepting bribes from Rolls-Royce, Airbus, and Bombardier to acquire their engines and planes. These moves left Garuda with a bloated and mismatched fleet that didn't suit their business, and they almost went under during COVID. Today, they're a significantly smaller airline after restructuring, which saw them nearly half their fleet. They basically are in no position to scale up capacity to Australia. Lion Air, though, has taken a more conservative approach when it comes to the Australian market. They hold around a 10% market share with their subsidiary Batik Air. But again, Jetstar is dominant here and truly low cost. For Lion Air, it just makes more sense to expand and compete in Asia, instead of trying to go on an all-out capacity war with Jetstar. Who really knows how this whole market will develop in the future, but I think it's safe to say that this structural asymmetry will likely persist for years to come. The Bogan missiles, the Jetstar flights, will continue to rocket towards Bali at a rate that dramatically outstrips their Indonesian competitors. This whole thing is an ad. I hope you all enjoyed that one. I hope you learned something. If you did, make sure to subscribe. Go follow me on Instagram here and LinkedIn here. Also, make sure you go check out the Flight Formula website. It's linked down below. But anyway, I'll see you all in the next one. Bye.
Simon? Is that Simon?
What's Simon?
Huh? I have to make a video of this trip, and then it's a taxi straight off.